Hello, guys. So today we'll be presenting our project for programming. The whole idea of our project is that it's a budget tracker created specifically for students of our university. Now, I'll explain the agenda. So, firstly, we'll explain the problem our budget tracker is aiming to solve. Then, we'll explain the features of the program. And then we're going to move on to the flow chart. And then after that, we're going to show a visual representation of our code. Now let's Saeed explain the problem our budget tracker is aiming to solve.
The problem our budget trackers aims to solve. Firstly, university students usually have a hard time managing their allowances. Many students have never managed a budget before. Personally, I have faced this issue, and a budget tracker like this would help me track my expenses. This problem could eventually lead to overspending and the mentality which makes it difficult to distinguish between wants and needs, and over time, creating bad spending habits. Here is where we hope our tracker comes in handy. Specifically created for students of our university, gutech, aiming for better financial awareness and to track the money spent on rent, entertainment, food and snacks, transportations, and so on. Our goal is to create a friendly tracker that would help students make wise financial decisions, dividing their allowance into each one of the expenses as mentioned above. Features of the program: ask students for their ID, budgeting expenses, expense counter, tells you if you have less than 10% left in your budget, and lastly, prints out the remaining budget. Now, moving on to the flowchart.
Thank you, Saeed, for explaining the features. Now, regarding the flowchart, firstly, the program will ask the user to enter their geotech ID. If the user enters an invalid ID, the program will break. However, if the user enters a valid ID, the program will grant the user access. After that, the program will ask the user to enter their first name, after which the program will greet the user, and then the program will ask for their allowance frequency, whether they're given their allowance weekly, bi weekly, or monthly. And then the program will confirm what the user entered. For example, if the user selected weekly, the program will print you selected weekly. And it will ask the user for their total allowance, which in this case is a budget. After that, the program will ask how many categories they want for their expenses, and the user has an option to choose up to four different categories. And then after that, the program will ask the user to enter the budget for each of their expenses. And a key point is that if the total sum of expenses is greater than the budget, the program outputs category budget exceed allowance. However, if the total sum is less than that, the program will continue, telling the user, asking them how much they spent today on each of their expenses. And if the program, if the user has less than 10% left from the budget, the program will let the user know so. After that, the user is given an option to choose whether they want to enter how much they spent for another day or not. If the user presses Y, yes, the program will repeat and ask how much they spent on each expense. If the However, if the user enters N, program will no longer ask for input. At the end, the program will print how much the user has left from the budget. And now we're going to show some screenshots of our code. As you can see, the program will ask the user for their geotech student ID, and it will grant them access if they enter a valid ID. After that, it will ask them for their first name, it will greet them, ask them for their allowance frequency, confirms what they selected, and so on and so forth. And for the second screenshot, it's basically a continuation. And yeah, thank you very much. Now we're gonna move on to Saeed to explain the code on programs.
Thank you, Mohammed. And now moving on to the actual program code. The program would first ask you to enter a gutech student ID. For example, this is an example of a correct gutech ID, access granted. And an example of an incorrect gutech ID would be something like 12345. This wouldn't let you through. So, okay. So it gives you access granted, putting a code in the form, this form right here. So the program asks you to enter your first name, and then it greets you, and then the program asks you for allowance frequency. In my case, I'll say monthly. So the program then asks you for the total amount you want for that month, which is 50 riyals, and it'll give you up to 4 categories. So you can pick 1 to 4 basically. I'll pick 2. First one being food, which is 20 riyals monthly, and then second is fuel, which is 30 riyals. So the program asks you how much you spent on food today, which is about 5 riyals, and then how much did you spend on fuel? Let's say 6 riyals. And then it asks you for another day, Y being yes and N being no. So yes, I want another day. How much did you spend on food today? Let's say today I spent 14 because I was hungry. And then it gives you a warning basically saying less than 10% left for food. So this means that your budget is below 10%. You have 10% left. How much did you spend today on fuel? Let's say 6 riyals. And then we click no, as in we finished the month. So you have 19 amount of riyals left from your budget, which is 50. Thank you for going through our project.